15. So first of all, this method of completing the square that we looked at yesterday only works if the number before the x squared is 1. It only works if the number before the x squared is 1. So does it look like we can even do this page as is? No. The method only works if the number before the x squared is 1. Could you do something, if you look at letter A, to make the number before the x squared equal 1, Toby? Well, but the GCF here, there is no GCF.
Divide by 2.
Here I have an equation, so I can go and do some dividing. And in general, what we're going to have to do if there's a number up front is we need to start by dividing every term by that a value. So to solve a quadratic equation where a does not equal 1, we need to start by dividing each term by a. Okay, hold on. Hold on one second. Dividing each term by a, the number that came before the x squared. So yesterday, take a look back at the problems we did yesterday. They all started with just 1x squared.
Yeah, but the ones that we did with the box.
That's not solving by completing the square, though. That's the difference. That's solving by factoring. So for each method that we look at, we have some different rules about what the problem has to look like. For solving by factoring, we need the thing to equal 0. For solving by square roots, we need the x squared on one side, the number on the other. For completing the square, our basic form we have to start from is we need a 1 before the x squared. So, looking at letter A, how could I make the x squared term have a 1 before it? I could start by dividing everything by 2. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to divide each term by 2, which is going to give me x squared plus 7 halves x equals 1/2. Here's the good news. The process is going to be exactly the same idea as yesterday. The only difference is I just have these fractions that I'm going to have to work with. Okay, first thing. First thing we do when we're completing the square, first of all, hopefully you already realize I have the x's on one side, number on the other, so it's in the right form now. First thing that I need to do is I need to do half my middle number squared. It is going to be a pain to divide a fraction by 2. I'd rather not do that. Rather than dividing a fraction by 2, what's an equivalent like fraction way of dealing with that? Multiplying by a half. So instead of dividing that fraction by 2, I want to multiply that fraction by a half. I want to do the problem 1/2 times 7 halves, half my middle number, and then I'm going to square it. That's going to tell me what I'm going to add to both sides. So, hold on one second. This is going to give me 7/4, which I need to square. You square a fraction by squaring the top and squaring the bottom. What is 7/4 squared? Just say it. 49 over 16. That's the piece I'm going to have to add to both sides. I'm going to add 49/16 on the left. I'm going to add 49/16 on the right.
What does that say underneath? What's the last line?
Like this stuff I'm doing over here?
7/4.
7/4 squared. That's just my work to try to figure out what thing I'm going to add to both sides. Okay. The factoring is not going to be bad. It's going to get factored into x and then half the middle term before I did any squaring. Just that 7/4. I'm going to say x plus 7/4 in parentheses squared. As for the other side, I need you to take a moment right now and just add those two fractions together. You need to get a common denominator.
57/16.
Get a common denominator and add them, please. Please go do the work. You should be turning 1/2 into 8/16. And I think when you add them, you should get 57/16. The good news is we're done with the ugly part of this problem. Hands to tell me what the next step is. This is the same as yesterday. What's our next step? 10. Plus or minus the square root. So I'm just going to rewrite that line just so people can kind of see the initial line and then what I'm about to do. But I'm going to go and do the plus or minus square root of this, the plus or minus square root of that. I'm going to get x plus 7/4 equals plus or minus. What is the square root of 57/16? Hands. Toby?
So plus or minus square root 7 over 4.
Not 7, but how about 57?
Yeah.
Sure, 57. We just lost the 50 part. Square root of 57 over 4. They're both nice because 57 you can't do anything with, and square root of 16, that's just 4. Andrea, what's the last step going to be? Absolutely, get the x by itself. We're going to go and subtract 7/4 from both sides. And we're going to get x equals negative 7/4 plus or minus square root of 57/4. Or, if you'd prefer, negative 7 plus or minus root 57 all over 4. Either one would work. Patrick.
All right. So if we go from where it's x plus 7/4 squared equals 57.
Down to this line, absolutely. The only reason I was writing this line was so people see I'm getting this, and then my next step is doing the plus or minus square root. No, I'm really just writing that so you see the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. There's really only one new piece, that whole divide everything by the a term. Everything else is the same as yesterday. The only slight difference is I don't like dividing a fraction by 2. I'd rather multiply a fraction by 1/2. Let's take a look at b. There are actually 2 ways I could start b. Either first step is okay. Zach, what do I mean by that? What could we do first? Not 2. Take a look at letter b. Divide by 4, we could absolutely do that first. There is another possible first step we could do. Aaron. Subtract 7. Doesn't matter which one of those you do first. Do one first, do the other second. Do those 2 steps and then stop, please. And do simplify your fractions along the way.
Is that what you guys are laughing about?
Hold on, I only have one left.
Okay, so we need to simplify these. We're going to get c squared plus 5/2 c equals negative 7/4. Can you get that part?
Yes.
Thank you. I would like you to try to figure out what you're going to add to both sides. Take a moment, see if you can go through the calculations, do half that middle number squared, and see if you can figure out what you're going to add to both sides. Write it down, please.
Are you going to give us fractions like these on tests, or are you going to do like the ones?
No, so when we have a test or quiz on this stuff, you'll certainly have some problems like last night where there's a 1 before the x squared and the fractions are nice enough. But there will also be problems with numbers before the x squared, and you are going to get these sorts of fractions.
Are they going to be like 5?
They'll be like these.
Okay.
They'll be like these.
Are you guys going to be saying like 27 over like?
I don't know. I have not written the test or quiz. Who thinks they have the fraction that they could share? that you're going to add to both sides. Fatima, what do you have? 25 over 16, what were you going to say?
I was going to say 5 over 4.
5 over 4?
Which is
Liad, what were you going to say? 25 over 16. I think I like that.
well, do the same thing.
Thank you. We need to do half of our middle number. Hold on a moment. Half that middle number, and then we're going to square it. Go back very quickly. Well, half of 5 halves is 5 fourths. When we square 5 fourths, that gives us 25 sixteenths. That's what I'm going to add on the left, and that's what I'm going to add on the right.
Dang it.
Do you see why I can't add 5
I
fourths?
forgot to square it.
Aha. Half the middle number squared.
I always forget to square it.
Please remember to square it.
You're good at that.
I'd like to see if you can do the next step of factoring and adding the fractions together. Don't get to the square root yet. I want to make sure we have the right number in the factor and the right number on the other side. So common denominator on the right and factor on the left, please.
I hate when C's are variable because I don't think for my parentheses.
I'm not sure what to say about that.
I draw it this way.
Very good.
Oh. I really was talking about this.
Quickly.
Oh, wait.
Griffin, do you have the factor?
No.
So we're going to do C, and then half our middle term before we did any squaring. So what is half that middle term before we do any squaring? This is my work to do half the middle term squared to get that 25 sixteenths. Benny? 5 fourths. It's just this piece before I get to the squaring part. So I'm going to say C plus 5 fourths, in parentheses, squared. If you wrote that thing out twice and FOILed, you would get your C squared plus 5 have C plus 25 sixteenths. Lauren, do you have the other side? 3 sixteenths, say that one more time? Negative 3 sixteenths. Yeah, I like that. So to get a common denominator, we're going to have negative 28 sixteenths plus 25 sixteenths. We're going to get negative 3 sixteenths over there. Questions or issues with this part? Toby? Because this gets factored into our variable and then half the middle term before we squared it. My middle term was 5 halves. I need to do half of 5 halves. If you say 5 halves, you're really just saying it's the middle term, not half the middle term. I'd like to see if you can finish. Do your plus or minus square root, solve for C. Let's finish this one off. I kind of want you here for the new material.
I can just do that. Your notes are online, right?
They will be today because the people on the field trip. Then I'll send you across the way and you'll do that in Mrs. Ebron's room. Grab the stuff in the makeup box. And do you have the homework that was due today?
This is all.
I already wrote it.
I don't think I have anything.
I'll sure you do because I just wrote it up. It's in Mrs. Ebron's room. Hopefully that's what your next step looked like. Plus or minus I, root 3 over 4. No, I needs to be either out front or up top with the root. Because if I was in the denominator, we'd have to like multiply by negative I or and stuff from the last chapter. No, I is up top. I'm going to finish by doing minus 5 fourths, minus 5 fourths. C is going to equal negative 5 fourths plus or minus I root 3 over 4. Can you follow what to do?
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, you just have to be able to follow it. The I has to be connected to the square root of 3. So if you do it as one big fraction, that's okay, but it would be negative 5 plus or minus I root 3, that entire thing over the 4, because I've got a real part here and an imaginary part over there. I would like you to do the first 2 steps of letter C and then stop.
Okay.
So do the moving part, do the dividing part. Something a little strange but sort of nice will happen here. Sort of nice. It'll be nice in the beginning. Thank you. And when you're done with that piece, take a look and make sure your equation looks like mine. Just the subtraction step and the divide by the A term. Doesn't matter what order you go in, you can divide first and then subtract. As long as before we add things to both sides, we've got the x's on one side, the constant on the other. I need to add something to both sides. Hands, if you think you can tell me what it is, and it's nice. We'll deal with that in a moment. Aaron? Square, what do you get? 4. We need to do the problem negative 4 divided by 2. Square that. So that's saying negative 2 squared. That's 4. I'm going to add 4 on the left. I'm going to add 4 on the right. I'd like you to factor. I'd like you to get a common denominator. Do not go to the square root part yet. Just factor and do your common denominator work. Ella, do you have the factoring piece, that side? So one more time? Yeah, so x minus 2 in parentheses squared. I like that. Hello? You'll be here after school for the quiz. Oh, good. Okay. Toby, have you done, I'm not sure what that was about. Toby, have you added, no, actually, Toby, what do you have? Shh. Negative 7 over 3 plus 12 over 3, what do you get? You should get x minus 2 squared equals 5/3. Here's where it stops being quite so nice. So please watch carefully. Something a little strange is going to happen. I'm just going to rewrite it so you see the steps. No, I don't need to see this part. But I'm going to go and do my plus or minus the square root. You certainly could have just done it on that line over there. I'm going to get x minus 2 equals, what's the square root of 5? Root 5. What's the square root of 3? In all the other problems, it was already nice in the denominator. This is kind of the payback for it. It was nice factoring stuff, but here I've got some ugly things going on. This was like that last homework problem that was due the day before where you all thought my answer was wrong, but I had rationalized the denominator. That is actually what we need to do here. So, to simplify this, we are going to multiply by root 3 over root 3.
So can you not just leave it as root 5?
You're not allowed to leave a square root in the denominator. Please don't do that.
So it can't just be root 5 over, root.
You can't just be root 5/3 because technically it does mean there's still a root in the denominator even though you didn't write it. It really means root 5 over root 3. We're going to get x minus 2 equals plus or minus root 15 over root 9. How is that any better?
Root 9 is 3.
X minus 2 equals plus or minus root 15 over 3. Go do your last easy step. Two plus or minus root 15/3 should be your final answer. And I would like to see if you can try letter D. And you're welcome to check in with someone near you as you go through this. But see what you can do. Like the homework that was due today, with tonight's homework, which isn't due till Monday, you're definitely going to want to go back to this page so you have some models of these in front of you as you're doing these. Try D and use the examples in A through C to help you. Yes. You mean like this thing over here? Yes. A half times what? Because normally, like yesterday, the rule was always divide that middle number by 2 and then square it. I don't like dividing a fraction by 2, so I'm just going to multiply that fraction that was in the middle by a half and then square that thing, because multiplying by a half is the same as dividing by 2. Okay, so right now we're trying letter D. Right now we're trying letter D. Oh, good. Do letter D. Right. Go do letter D. I would like you to do letter D. That's what I would like. Thank you. And we're on page 15.
So when you do the plus, or when you do the square root thing,
Mm-hmm.
you have to write plus and minus in front of it?
You do.
Okay.
You do, because it can't just magically show up at the end. That's the whole idea of undoing a square. You undo the square by not just the square root, but the plus or minus square root, and then it's got to show up ever since then. But the making stuff is not due whenever it says it's regular homework for next time. The good news, by the way, is what we're doing right now, I think is about as tough as Algebra 2 gets. This is one of the tougher things this year.
Wow.
So if you're thinking this is easy,
I heard
Yeah, you're ahead of the game.
I heard logs were like the hardest thing.
not at all. Logs are a piece of cake.
Okay.
They're just not going to make any sense right now because we don't know enough yet. That'll be easy. You'll like them. Have you hopefully figured out you're adding 49/36 to both sides?
Yes.
Maybe. I'm going to go do some factoring. Does negative 11/36 look right? We really shouldn't be doing that during class. Can we get negative 11/36? Am I wrong? Are you right?
You're right. We're right. Everyone's right.
So I got a common denominator. I multiplied the negative 5/3 by 12 over 12. Oops, times 12 over 12. Negative 60 over 36, Toby. I know exactly what you did. Because it's not 5/3, it's negative 5/3. You lost the negative. That's completely what you did. Can we get negative 11/36? Okay, well, we're going to keep going. Let's see. Mason, what's the top going to become? Square root of negative 11.
There's going to be an I.
Yep, there is. I.
It's going to stay 11.
It's going to stay 11. I root 11. And 6 on the bottom. Okay. And Zach, how do we finish? X is going to equal 7 over 6, plus or minus I, root 11 over 6. Say that again? Show all the algebra, plus or minus 7, 6. Yes?
Let's say it was like 7 over 5.
Please listen, because you might have the same question.
So if it was 7 over 5.
Yep.
and
Excuse
you-
me.
And you wanted to combine it, like,
You would need to get a common denominator. So actually, like in this problem, I'm fine with saying that 2 plus or minus root 15 thirds. You could also say 6 thirds plus or minus that. So 6 plus or minus root 15 over 3. There's no need for that. So you can just leave it. Okay, well, shut